PR Connections Radio presents Ethics Realty is a full-service real estate agency that provides a service for finding the ideal property for residential, commercial, and investor-centered clients. Whether you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned buyer or investor, they provide service to all and listen to understand your goals and needs. For more information about their wealth and investment-centered services, call 702-518-1606 or visit their website, ethicsrealty.net.
All right, welcome to the Real Deal Podcast. So in this episode, we're going to be going over how to prepare for a recession. We talked about that we were going to cover this topic in the last episode, and what perfect timing. Not only is it the spooky season, but last week we had a major correction in the stock market. So this conversation is going to be of high value, not only to you who have maybe not prepared, but especially for preparing for the next recession. Because in my opinion, recessions are the biggest opportunities that most people miss in building wealth. So let's first talk about a couple of the different strategies. And most of these just depend on what position of life you are in, right? So strategy number one is just holding cash, right? So cash typically loses its purchasing power as the Federal Reserve prints more money every single year, right? The Fed prints money for a wide variety of reasons, primarily to stimulate the economy, right? If your cash was holding its buying power, you would have no incentive to spend it. But if you know that next month your cash is going to purchase just a little bit less apples than it purchased last month, you're going to be a little bit more prone to use that cash for the things that you need. So in a recession, the opposite happens, right? Essentially, cash becomes incredibly valuable and assets are cheap. Assets are anything from the produce that you buy at the grocery store to gas to housing to when you purchase a vehicle or even stocks for retirement. Now, choosing which assets you invest into in a recession is going to determine what's going to happen to you during the next wave of inflation, because that's always what happens after a recession at some point in time. So the next thing is going to be to increase your job security. This is kind of what I would call like your level 2 kind of a strategy. Mainly because you can save up as much cash as you want. Again, it's getting pelted by inflation. But if you lose your job during a recession and you're drawing from those cash reserves, well, that's money that you can't spend on buying stocks, real estate, or other assets that go up in value. So gaining skills, networking, building a community around you to support your life plans is incredibly important. Next, we're going to go over the strategy of leveraging assets with debt for liquidity. This is great for appreciating assets, but it never use leverage to purchase assets that do not bring in more cash flow than the life of the asset. And we'll dive in deeper a little bit later in the podcast here. Work on personal contentment. The only people who believe that the market will leave them behind are people who do not know how to catch up in the market. And what that means is if you are in your 30s or in your 40s and you say, you know what, I don't have savings for retirement, and so I can't catch up because so many people are further ahead of me, simply that belief will actually hold you back from being able to catch up. It's very easy to catch up in the economy, mainly because 90% of people are making the wrong choices. If you just simply shift from making the correct choices, you will catch up just by sheer willpower. So working on your personal contentment will help you ride out a recession and get back on your feet a lot faster. Next thing is hedging your bets. Cash is one of the best ways to hedge your bets. So it kind of does come full circle, but you can also diversify into other assets that you do not currently own, like gold, real estate, options, futures, or even buying businesses. And so let's first talk about the cash economy. This is where most people learn how to invest, or at least how to operate in the real world. You get a steady income. You might feel broke at first, right? And some people kind of hope for the market to crash so that things are cheaper. And the good news is a market correction can oftentimes be your ticket out of poverty. However, holding cash is one of the best ways to hedge against the market correction, because in that particular scenario, your cash does go up in value. But the most important thing that you can do is put cash away for a rainy day and just ignore the people that are telling you it's going to lose value to inflation. So it's really hard to stay disciplined. But in your first year, whether you just got out of debt, maybe it might be credit card debt, or you had a car loan or a student loan, or maybe you were a student or you just got your first job, whatever it may be, when you're in that phase of feeling broke, you're going to get a lot of bad advice. And it really doesn't matter where you put your money for your first year. It just matters that you're spending less than what you earn, right? So if you earn an income of $100,000 a year, but you spend it all, you're actually less rich than a person who makes $40,000 a year and is able to keep $10,000 of it in the bank by the end of the year, because you only make what you save. You don't really make what you earn. So, and think of it this way, right? If you save up $10,000, without that $10,000 sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, if you find a great investment opportunity, but you don't have the money, you don't have any capital to deploy into that opportunity. Likewise, if you cling onto cash too tightly and you just stay in this cycle of holding cash over a long-term period of time, inflation will eventually eat away at your buying power, which is going to lead to a rougher time in retirement. So, level 2 is increasing your job security, right? Notice how we haven't talked about which assets to buy or sell yet. We will go into those at the end of this video, mainly because when you are in the job market and you are gaining skills and you're networking and you're building a community of people around you, right? This is something that everybody needs. And in a recession, if you lose your job, it's going to be the community around you that you've built, whether it's your family members, your friends, your coworkers, who are going to help you find that new employment. So investing into people that are on your team is incredibly important, because if you take that $10,000 cash reserve, and let's say your expenses are $2,000 a month, with just 3 months of looking for a job, you've eaten away at over half of your savings. So keep in mind that keeping your job, or at least finding a new job quickly, is going to allow you to have some extra capital. And once you found that new job, you can use that extra capital and deploy it into some opportunity. We'll talk about what that looks like again later on in this episode. The second shift is a real thing, right? So realizing that your home skills not only translates into quality work ethic, but it saves you money and reduces burnout. So another thing to consider is when we are dealing with times of rapid inflation. For example, we saw this post-COVID in 2021 and 2022. Everybody was clamoring at the bit to try to get a better job, try to get a better car, trying to upgrade their house, right? We were in an absolute buying frenzy. And it seemed like if you were holding on to cash, you were dumb, right? But if you were essentially living on less than your means during this lifetime, during this part of life, and you were building up a cash reserve, and you were buying, maybe stocks in your retirement accounts or what have you, and you were living on less than what you made, right? You'd be building a lot of contentment. And so if you were cooking for yourself, that's one of the main ways that I save money, is I really invested into my cooking skills. And so I cook dinner, and we only eat out maybe a couple of times a month, and that saves us a ton of money. So investing into some of your home skills instead of hiring those services out can also be a great way to build your personal contentment and actually save quite a bit of money. I can't tell you how many people I talk to. They might earn, a lot of money in their career. They might be executives. They're working 70, 80 hours a week, but then they don't have time to take care of their home life. And so they hire all those jobs out, and all of those jobs accumulate quite a bit. And in a recession, if you were to lose your job, right, your landscaper, your maid, whoever, right, whoever's cooking for you, if you're going out to eat, you're paying somebody to cook for you, right? All those people need to make a living too, right? And so just something to consider is that having those skills actually helps you save money in a recession as well. Level 3 is using leverage to purchase assets. Leverage is incredibly important, especially when you're just starting out in building wealth. Because if you enter the stock market, let's just say with $10,000, right, that you've saved up, you only control $10,000 worth of assets. Meanwhile, millionaires and billionaires are controlling millions and billions of dollars worth of assets. But if you took that $10,000 and you put it down on a house, you now control $200,000 worth of assets. And if your $10,000 went up by, let's just say 10% in the stock market, well, that's only a $1,000 profit. But if your home goes up just 5%, you've literally doubled your money, because that $200,000 home is now worth $210,000. Your $10,000 down payment is now worth $20,000. So just even a 5% increase in the real estate market can way outperform a 10% increase in the stock market, simply because of having leveraged assets. Now, something to make a note here. I have 5 rules to stay safe with debt. This is just my personal rules. You can do whatever you want with your finances. But rule number 1 is I only purchase things with debt that go up in value and the combined appreciation and cash flow is greater than the interest rate. So what that means is if I have a 7% interest rate, if the asset goes up in value by 3% and it has a 5% dividend, you would say, or produces 5% worth of cash flow, that's an 8% return. 8% is greater than 7, so I would be willing to purchase that asset. So just a quick example for you right there. Rule number 2 is never purchase vehicles, personal items, or start a business with debt. That's mainly because all of these 3 things are likely to not only go down in value or to fail. I want to be using debts for things that are almost guaranteed to go up in value and help those things outperform because they're so safe. Number 3 is business debt is only used to grow an existing business that is profitable. All right, rule number 4. All debts are paid off holding cash. Until all debts are paid off, holding cash is limited to 6 months of expenses, and only assets that are likely to produce a 20% more or more return on investment over a 10 period of time can be purchased. What that means is if I do not think that an asset is going to go up by 20% or more, I do not purchase it until I am done paying off my home. This is incredibly important because when you are getting ready for retirement, you need more guaranteed income. Lower risk typically means lower returns. But if I can't get my mortgage paid off all the way, there's no point in getting a low guaranteed return when all of that capital could have been being used to pay off my loan early. So just something to consider. If you have a mortgage, you might want to be really picky about what you invest your money into. All right. Number 5 is if there are no buying opportunities that follow the rules of rule number 4, then that cash can be built on the side until I find an opportunity that qualifies for rule number 4. And that also means that if I have extra cash that's above those 6 months of expenses, I am actively looking for opportunities to put that cash into play. So just something to keep in mind. You can use cash in a variety of different ways. And again, we're going to talk about that in a second here. All right. Level 4 is personal contentment, right? So a lot of people, they're going to save up for a rainy day, but when discounts hit the market because of a recession or whatever happens, they immediately abandon their wealth building strategy and they chase their desires, right? So if they didn't get laid off work, right, they're comparatively doing good compared to everyone else, right? If everybody else just got laid off and you were able to keep your $100,000 salary, you're doing really good when the buffets are offering discounts, when vehicles are, being held on the lot for a period of time, and those dealers are willing to mark down those vehicle costs, or those buy one, get one free coupons. Did you really need 2 TVs? No, the one you had was working just fine, I bet. And you were just not content. So you went out and you purchased a bunch of stuff, right? So it's not during the good times when everything's expensive, right? You're employed, and then somehow you're still making an incremental progress on your goals. You don't quit during those times. You quit during the times when everything is cheap. There's a lot of temptation out there. It might be hard to find a new job, and so you don't like the job that you have, and so you might take a different job that pays less. It's the investments you made that are demotivating you because they've gone down in value, right? You bought some index funds in your retirement account, and you saw that the market went down, and so you're like, oh man, I'm not making progress on my retirement goals because I need $1 million in my retirement account in order to retire, right? And so if I had $100,000 in there and now it's only 50, I'm now 5% further away from my initial goal. So, which might seem tough, but it's usually when the stock market's down is when it's most likely to go up. So again, remember what I said earlier in rule number 4, right? If it's likely for me to get a 20% return or more, that's when I'll buy an asset, right? Typically, it's unlikely that index fund will return 20% or more. But it's when the stock market is down when it's actually way more likely to produce a fantastic return. And in my opinion, it's not impossible to create over 100% return on your money, depending on what you're investing into and how you use it. All right, level 5, hedging, the part of the conversation that most people wanted me to talk about. So I'm going to spend most of my time here now that we've laid down a basic foundation of the mindset that goes into investing during a recession. So this conversation comes full circle, but you have to understand there's 2 different kinds of hedging. There's low risk, low reward, and high risk, high reward, right? There's obviously low risk, high reward situations that exist, and then vice versa, right? There's high risk, low reward. So for example, going to the casino is high risk, low reward. Low chance that you'll actually get a reward from that experience, and it's a very high risk. Versus buying real estate or your home is fairly low risk and the rewards are immense, right? So keep that in mind that there is somewhat of a spectrum here, and it's more circular shaped than it is linear. And we can get into that more in depth on a different day. But here are the basics, right? Business ownership is probably at the top of the highest returns that you can get, right? But it's also the highest risk, and it takes a lot of your time and attention. Real estate takes a little bit less time and attention, slightly lower risk, and the returns are phenomenal due to leverage. Number 3 is day trading, stocks and options. I love day trading. I love stocks and options. That for me is a diversification from real estate because I own real estate. My family owns real estate. I like rental properties. And, with my career centered around this one asset class, for me, day trading is a great way for me to diversify. So then that way, not all of my income is completely dependent on the Las Vegas real estate market. So that's something that I always keep in mind. So that's what I like to do with a lot of my extra funds is I will day trade. Number 4 is index fund investing in a tax advantaged account. You get better returns in a tax advantage account because you're not paying taxes, right? So that's something to consider. And if you are investing with your 401k and your company gives you a match, up to the match point, you are getting significantly higher returns than whatever you were initially investing, right? So let's just say you were investing $100 into the stock market in a brokerage account. This is just a standard account, or you get a match where you put $100 in, plus the company matches you another $100. You're pretty much getting 100% return on investment from simply just using the company match. Then if you invest that further, you're getting 100% investment compounded by 10%. That's a fantastic way to use your money, in my opinion, right? And typically, index funds are probably one of the safest ways to use a taxable account, a tax advantaged account. My mistake. All right, number 5 is just kind of a funny one I got on the list, and that's gardening. I've actually got some tomatoes that are ripening right now, so I'm going to be making some green salsa here in a couple months. So what's funny is sometimes even your hobbies can produce a return on investment. However, they typically do take more time than what the returns are worth. So just keep that in mind. Like, don't take up gardening for the money savings. If you want your house to look better, you actually enjoy doing it. It is something that is relaxing and can produce some financial benefit. Number 6 is gold. I have used gold as a hedge in the past. I don't anymore now that I own a house. That's mainly because if I needed cash in order to pay my mortgage for a period of time where maybe my income wasn't as high as it could be or some other reason, right? I need that asset to be 100% available and liquid, and gold is not perfectly liquid like cash is, but also it doesn't follow the rule where if I'm going to risk money, it needs to be producing a 20% return or more. I don't believe that gold over a 10-year period of time can produce a 20 or more percent return compounded. And so compounded 20% return, for example, over 10 years would look like $10,000 turning into $50,000. That's how powerful compounding interest is at 20%. And I don't think you could take $10,000 and put it into gold and in 10 years expect to see quite a bit. Now, if my home was paid off and I was completely retired and I didn't own a business anymore, I probably would own some gold because gold is a great hedge, just like cash is. But for me, cash just has those extra benefits, and that's why I hold cash personally. The 8th thing on this list is insurance. Insurance typically has a negative return on investment. However, it is a fantastic hedge against hard times. For example, if you were in a car accident and you needed to replace a vehicle, it's a lot easier to do that, right, with the insurance payout than it is from the money that could be invested into the market, right? So that's an example of protecting your future returns in the market because you would never want to sell your assets when the market is down because you're literally losing the best wealth building opportunity that's right in front of you, right? So insurance is important, but in my opinion, it's the lowest return on investment because it's the least likely to actually produce a return. All right, let's take the last 5 minutes here. Let's go over an example on how to actually deploy hedging and actually use hedging in order to make extra returns in the market, right? So one person, right, they don't know how to hedge, right? They just simply take some basic financial advice and they're going to stay disciplined, even though we know that the odds are against them of staying disciplined. They're going to, let's just say that it actually works out for them, right? They take $10,000 and they save that up in a year's point in time and they invest that into the market. Next year, they save up another $10,000. They took a look at their portfolio, right? And the market's tanking, right? It's down 50%. So their $10,000 is now worth $5,000. And they take that $10,000 and they put it in at the bottom, right? And so now they're $15,000 invested into the market, and the market doubles over a period of time, let's say 3 years, right? It doubles over that 3 years, and now they've turned their $15,000 into $30,000. Okay, they still made money, right? They still followed the strategy. They were disciplined, right? And, what was $10,000 would have eventually been worth, something valuable, like maybe, I actually probably would have just came back up in value, right? So they actually did do well by, it's called dollar cost averaging, right? They use their income to just buy stocks every single year. And that's not a bad way to invest. But this is how I do it. And if you like it, then, maybe that'll work well for you. So another person, they decide to hedge their bets, right? They invest $5,000 into a well-researched stock, right? So they believe that this stock is going to outperform the market, right? And typically, well-researched stocks, high-quality companies that are profitable typically do outperform the market. In my opinion, it's an absolute lie that a lot of people tell you that you cannot beat the market. Even though most financial advisors don't beat the market, they're not investing their own money. So they don't have the objective of making the most returns. They have the objective of losing the least amount of money in the down market. Keep that in mind. So another person decides to hedge, right? They invest $5,000 into a well-researched stock, and they hold $5,000 in cash. And maybe it's in a money market account. They're getting a little bit of interest on it over a year. And so the market tanks and their stock also loses half its value because all stocks are down about half. And they say, there's nothing wrong with the profitability of the stock, right? It's doing great. I'm going to take all the cash that I was holding aside. And now that cash with a little bit of interest is worth $5,200, right? And they take that $10,000 that they've saved up through the year, they take that $5,200 and they dump that, and now they have a $17,200 position on this stock that's in a down market. And after the stock recovers, it outperforms the rest of the market because you got to remember, an index, for example, the S&P 500 is an index of 500 different stocks, right? Some of those stocks in the down market are going to go bankrupt, and the index eats all of those losses. And some of those stocks outperform, right? And the index absorbs their gains too. And it absorbs the losses and the gains, and it kind of smooths out the ride, and it just goes up in value a lot slower than, for example, investing in a singular stock. So that singular stock might go down a lot more in value, and then it might rip and go way, way, way further up in value than the index by comparison, right? And so let's say this goes up by 4 times the amount of where it was at the bottom, right? Now you're sitting at $68,800 in their new account balance, right? And so that's an example of a real wealth building opportunity. There's nothing wrong with dollar cost averaging if that's your favorite investment strategy. However, hedging is what I used over the last 2 years to be able to transition from, being a full-time realtor to now I've got kids, I watch them during the daytime. And so I do real estate, not part-time, but I do it in a slow market like right now where I haven't had as many real estate sales. If it were not for my success in my day trading account, right, I would not have been able to pay all of the bills that I needed to pay. So it's something to consider that if you want to build some real wealth fast, it's not necessarily a fast way to build wealth, right? You still have to be patient, right? But it's not unrealistic to be able to get 100% return on investment while day trading. Also, at the very low end, you can lose money in a year's time, right? So I anticipate that over a 20-year period of time or a 10-year period of time, like some long period of time, my goal is 20% compounded growth, right? And I do that through a mix of options trading and stock trading. I'll go into one other example of a riskier hedge with day trading that you can do, and that is buying a put option, right? Buying a put option is typically seen as an insurance play, right? You might own a stock. Let's just say you own a stock like Apple, and then you buy 100 shares of that stock, and then you buy a put option. That put option puts the risk onto somebody else, right? That's literally what it means. It puts the risk onto somebody else, right? And so if the stock market goes up, at least, hey, you own 100 shares, the stock does great, but you lose all of the money that you paid for insurance. But if that stock goes down, your put option actually gets more valuable. And there's 2 ways that you could play this option. You can assign the shares to somebody else and keep all your profits, right? Or you can sell the put option to somebody else for a gain, use those funds to then buy more Apple shares. And then now you have maybe $200 worth, 200 shares worth of Apple, and that goes back up in value, right? In my opinion, I don't like hedging like that, but some people do. It's just an example of how you can make money in a recession. And it typically doesn't work because you have to constantly buy a put option, which is always losing money until it eventually makes money, right? Versus I like kind of trading with the market direction. And in my opinion, hedging cash is a plenty good way to do things, right? As I showed you, your cash can absolutely make a lot of money when your buying power goes up and you're willing to deploy it and you're willing to really go all in. When everybody else is saying, I'm going to sell, and you decide to go in and buy, in my opinion, that's the smartest move. And you can do that in a wide variety of areas. I personally don't advise doing it in the real estate market. However, my wife and I timed the real estate market fairly well. 2023, when housing prices were plummeting and they were at a relative low, we decided to purchase because everybody else was fearful of the higher interest rates. But as we can see, high interest rates were here to stay. They've only dropped about 1% since 2023. And prices are up way more than 1%. I don't know if you've checked, but prices are up 20% since the recent bottom in 2023. So just realize that waiting doesn't always work. In the real estate market, we also need to hedge, right? So if you own a home, right, and you lose your job, you need to pay the mortgage even in a down market, right? So when everybody else is panic selling because they didn't prepare, right, you're riding out the storm with cash savings until the market bounces back and you're either fully employed again, or your house has gone up in value because everybody else is fully employed again and everybody else is buying houses. You can sell your house at a profit and then buy a smaller or less expensive house that meets your current budget demands, right? So nobody really anticipates losing their job, but you still do need to prepare against it. And so what I want you to get out of this is not a get rich quick scheme of how to make money, because that's what everybody tries to treat a recession as. More so, it's how do I prepare to stay wealthy or to get wealthy even when times are bad, right? I've got a garden, like I mentioned earlier, and every time it rains, I am very thankful because that means that's a day that I don't have to go out and water my plants. Now, I still water even when it's sunny out, but when it rains, I actually benefit. I actually get that 20 minutes a day back, and I get to do something else with 20 minutes of my time. I do enjoy spending time in my garden, but every single day can get quite monotonous. So those rainy days actually benefit me. Same thing when you know how to hedge, right? When you know how to properly use your finances in such a way to be advantageous to you, when you're financially prepared, those rainy days aren't bad days anymore. They are opportunities to plant future money seeds, right? That are going to grow into amazing money trees. So hopefully you got something out of this podcast. We'll see you guys next time when we go over, let's see what our next episode is, the 5 ways to make money in real estate.
Hey, business owners, want to get your brand in front of thousands of locals in Vegas without blowing your budget on overpriced ads? Ready to boost your visibility? Use promo code PRTalk for an exclusive offer. Click the link in the description or contact 702-445-9488 to talk to our experts today. Vegas is watching. Make sure they see you.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.